Practice Makes Perfect by Neon Zangetsu, Chapter 1, Just a Little Confidence. Life is in Izu, life in Hansel is so boring. Sow the fields, milk the cows, feed the pigs. That's all I ever do. I wish someone would save me from this boring country's life. I want action, I want adventure, I want excitement. An explosion ensues. Not like that. Arc. Just a little confidence that he was burning. Everything was burning. Everyone. You just couldn't give up, Naruto. Goodbye, my friend. Panting harshly, the young man woke from the darkness of his nightmare with a start. Blue eyes burst open, wide and frantic, mind racing, heart hammering in his chest. He struggled to make sense of what he'd just seen and failed miserably. A muddy brow ceiling swam overhead, blurring in indistinctly as he blinked spots away from his very blurry vision. He tried to move and regretted it at once. Pain, fire, agony, burning, searing heat burned through his irises, shot straight into his head, and skittered about in his skull like a bunch of drunken spiders. Uh, he grit his teeth against it with a groan. In his frenzy, he closed his eyes against the light. Where was it coming from? And tried to roll over, hoping that would make things better. Mistakes were made. Strangled hiss tore from his throat as his entire body convulsed. If there had been pain before, then this was agony. Gasping, he tried to turn on his other side. His skin didn't like that one bit. Every muscle in his body clamped down in uniform, his body frantically trying to defend itself against this unseen attack. Everything hurt. He could barely think. Breathing itself became a physical act of will on his part. He nearly blacked out, such was the strain. All right, he paused, trying to blink. No sudden movements. With infinite care, he opened his eyes again and balked at what he found there. Not the room itself. It was bare enough, brown walls to match the ceiling and floor, a nightstand bearing a single lamp and a near window, but someone had drawn the curtains across it. Judging by the lack of light, he assumed it was night. No, the room didn't frighten him in the least. It was the state of his body that alarmed him. When he looked down, he found himself in a bed of some sort, propped up by pillows, his form haphazardly swathed in white linen bandages. What little skin he could see was an awful bruised, burned, and blackened mess. His once stylish black and orange trousers were matted with dry blood, slash marks, and burns of some sort, the kind one might get from fire or lightning. Heart pounding in his chest, he tried to move his limbs. His fingers twitched, his toes curled. With that, he released the breath he hadn't even realized he'd been holding. Good, not paralyzed then, just in an awful lot of pain. Whiskered cheeks pinched into a scowl. Even that caused his body to ache. Trapped, he could only glare at the ceiling. Just how badly had he been hurt, and by what or who? He couldn't remember. His head ached in the worst of ways. The thought distressed him further still. He tried to prop himself up on his elbows, only for his arms to buckle beneath the wave of weakness. His head struck the pillows, and this time an aggravating growl escaped him. Damn it, this sucks! Had his voice always been that weak? It was barely a whisper. Just as well, too, because the door creaked open and a young woman clad in a rough blue tunic and black breeches swept in, humming softly to herself. She cradled a tray of some sort in her hands, and his gaze narrowed upon it, noticing the glass of water, a bowl of broth, and a roll of bandages delicately balanced atop the thin metal plate. Even in his thirst, the young man noticed things about her. She didn't notice him at first, much less realize his eyes were open, but he noticed her. He how could he not? Wasn't like he could do anything else. Hers was a lean yet lovely visage, marred only by the faintest birthmark upon her left cheek. Golden hair, not unlike his, wound into a loose braid that fell over one shoulder. She moved with a certainty and grace that seemed vaguely familiar, but caught in the bleary daze. that he was. The young man found he couldn't quite place it. One look at her confirmed his suspicions. Her arms were well toned, they hinted at the muscle beneath. There was a sword belted to her hip, too, suggestion she at least had some weapon training. Still asleep, are we? She spared him a brief, fretful glance, not noticing his half-lidded eyes as she bumped the door shut with her hip. No surprise, I suppose. Time to change your bandages. This close, he could see hers. They were the most piercing shade of green he'd ever seen. Such a strange color. He could stare at them all day, and he would have too, if his mouth hadn't betrayed him. Cracked lips parted. I hear you. She heard him and pivoted with a yelp, dropping the tray with a clatter. You're awake? The young man opened his mouth to speak again, but here at last words failed him. Only a groan emerged. Oh, right, you must be thirsty. She glanced at the fallen tray and hastily scooped it up, but both the water and broth were sadly lost. Blast it! Stay right there. I'll be right back. Quick as a flash, she flung herself out in the hall. Pa! He heard her holler as she ran, voice slipping into an odd accent. He's up! Call the doctor! A distant clamor upstairs caught the man's attention, followed by a decidedly sleepy but gruffy voice. I'll fetch him myself. Keep the lad awake. Not 3 seconds later, the young maiden returned, bearing a tall, cold glass of water in one hand and a damp towel in the other. Blue eyes regarded it like the sweetest ambrosia. She saw it and dared to smile. Here you go. The whiskered warrior tried to reach for it. He really did. His right hand made it halfway before another bout of pain racked his back. His shoulders clenched and his body failed him. He tried to snarl, but it emerged as little more than a weak whine. He was better than this, he knew he was, so why couldn't he move? Thankfully, his fellow blonde heard him and acted. Bless her soul. She glided the rest of the way and sat down beside him on the bed. The mattress creaked only a little beneath her weight. Drink slowly now. The green-eyed girl lifted the glass to his lips, but didn't tip it back. Jade orbs made a jure. You haven't had anything to eat or drink in quite some time. He dared a nod, grimacing against the throbbing in his spine, and did as he was bade. She gripped it back. She tipped it back, and he sipped slowly, not quite trusting his body to keep even that down. Incredibly, it did. Only once he polished off the glass did he trust himself to speak. How long was I? You've been asleep for 3 days. 3? No wonder he felt so weak. We didn't think you were going to make it. Our doctor did all he could for you, but you just couldn't wake up. When his brow furrowed, she flailed her arms and hasted to explain. Not that I thought you wouldn't, but you were just so cold, still and cold. And oh gods, I'm babbling, aren't I? His world was starting to blur again. He squinted and shoved back the haze before sleep could take him again. Strangely enough, her bedside manner actually tore a smile from him, just a little one. It's fine, he croaked the words. Who are you? Me? The faintest flush touched his savior's face as she leaned back. I'm Juniper Ark, Juniper. He cemented the name into his memory. That, at least, he wouldn't forget. His gaze slipped to the bowl of broth she recovered. It was still half full. Then he glimpsed another plate left upon a nearby dresser, and the half-eaten turkey sandwich on it. Her own meal, no doubt. She'd likely left it there while he was asleep. A low growl pushed through his stomach. The loaf of bread she left on the dresser. Jennifer caught him staring and frowned. No. She flicked his forehead gently. No, 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 absolutely not. You're much too weak for solid food right now. Your stomach won't be able to handle it. Blue eyes flashed, green narrowed and challenged. She crossed both arms beneath her bosom and huffed. Still he frowned at her. Juniper remained unfazed. You may have some of the broth, she said archly, provided you're able to keep it down, but no solid food, not yet. In the end he was forced to yield to her. She knew it too. The cheeky minx. And Juniper dipped a spoon into the watery broth, ladled some out, and held it beneath his lips. You know, her words took on a littling edge. I always wanted to do this, say ah. He was beginning to think this girl was a bit touched in the head, but he was hungry and he complied, despite the pain in his, well, everything. The whiskered warrior forced himself to eat. Really wasn't bad broth, and besides, he was hungry. Now if only his throat didn't feel like it was on fire. We found you on the outskirts of town. When he was sated, Juniper leaned forward, pressing a cold cloth he'd seen earlier to his forehead. It helped more than she knew. You were badly hurt. Do you remember anything? He should, shouldn't he? When he reached for the space where his memories ought to be, he found only a gaping void, nothing, not even his name. When it came a vague sense of loss, as though he'd forgotten something terribly important. His brow furrowed in concentration, and his reward was a fresh jolt of pain in his skull. He grit his teeth against it, but the pain came harder, harsher, heavier. It smothered him now, swaddling his every thought in a cottony haze. Darkness swarmed in. He tried to push it back, he really truly did, but his body betrayed him. Against his will, his eyelids began to droop. Juniper saw it and peeled the wet cloth from his forehead with practiced care. Perhaps she was a nurse, or studying to be one. It went into a basin at the floor he'd not noticed before, was soaked again, and from there gently reapplied to his face. His warm skin protested to the cool cloth at first, but this proved a pleasant ache, a distraction from the all-consuming pain and the itchiness that tugged at his body. Belatedly, he wondered if he had a fever. It certainly felt like it. Then she went to work on his bandages. He tried not to look. Tired, are we? Juniper made a small talk as she worked, distracted him from the blistering skin and half-healed wounds. Bless her. I'm not surprised. Feel free to sleep if you like. Panic had him shaking his head. Don't want to. You're okay, she soothed him. I don't think you're past the worst. I think you're past the worst of it now, and none of your wounds look to be infected. It's going to be all right. You're going to be all right. She reached out slowly, carefully, and touched his head. Firm fingers ran across his scalp, gently touching his caked hair. Everything will be all right. Her voice was light and laughter and life, and it soothed the ragged edge of his fractured mind. You can sleep now. I'll still be here when you wake up. Would he? He wasn't sure. It was so tempting to close his eyes and drift away into his dreams, but fear reared its ugly head. He'd slept for 3 days already. He couldn't remember anything, anyone. Everything ached. It felt like someone had taken sandpaper to his very soul. How long would it be until he woke again? What if he didn't? What if he passed away in his sleep? Terror clawed at him. He didn't want to die. He might not remember much of anything, but even a man with no memories wanted to live. His tongue betrayed him. Promise? Of course, she dared to giggle. Don't you know, an ark never goes back on their word. I'll even hum you a lullaby. Would you like that? Juniper preened in the face of his confusion. Huh? That sunny smile flittered out again. Surprised them. I normally use my semblance for shouting and knocking things down, but it has other uses too. He didn't have the strength to argue further. Juniper smiled, accepting his silence for what it was. She touched one hand to her chest, closed her eyes, and began to hum softly under her breath. Her voice rose and fell in a soft, nameless tune he didn't recognize. There were no words to it, just the gentle music. It soothed him, though he tried to resist. Whatever it was, it felt stronger than a simple tune. There was something behind it, nothing malevolent, but powerful nonetheless. Believing in him, it seemed to say, you have nothing to fear here. I will tend your wounds and offer you succor. You are safe, I promise. He couldn't help it. He went under. Three frantic questions filled his mind as he spiraled back into the black. What happened to me? Where the hell am I? And then finally, who am I? As he flipped under her, felt under he felt Juniper's hand touch his, her thumb slipping under his palm and caressing it gently. Such a simple gesture, it was just a little confidence, a touch of bravery, a gentle nudge from one soul to another. Neither thought much of it at the end. Why would they? Two lost souls from two different souls. What would possibly go wrong from such a thing, but from that moment, that singular touch of a hand, a simple smile between a healer and her patient, well, legends have been born from less. From that moment on, Remnant would never be the same. Previews. One day the man surprised Juniper. He remembered his name, Naruto. A week later he was finally able to leave his sick bed. A month after that he learned to walk again, and then he remembered how to fight. The hell is Aura? Juniper blinked in surprise. You're not from around here, are you? No, he croaked the word, growling at his still recovering voice. No hospitals. I don't trust hospitals. I'm happy here. Juniper seemed oddly pleased by that. Well, if you say so, you're still going to help me. After all this time? Well, it's like my pa always says. Juniper grinned at him and tucked a stray strand of her hair behind her ears, green eyes bright and intent. If you do a job, do it right. An arc never goes back on their word. With that smile, Naruto felt something flutter in his chest. Oh dear. Juniper knew how to use that sword. Aha! Found her! He pitched his voice to be heard. Saffron Arc, get down here, young lady. You scared your mother half to death. But Daddy, their little girl grinned down at him from the tree. Look, I walked up here all by myself, and he crooked a brow. Can you walk back down? Her sheepish expression was telling. End of chapter 1.